speaking of privatizing, this story really caught my eye. The best fix for the Postal Service, writes Peter Orszag, formerly of the Obama administration. Now, where is he working now? Is he a professor or something? Or is he going out and doing public service? Wait, because I know this. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He's an executive at Citibank. So Peter Orszag writes of the recent problems with the Postal Service. The Postal Service is expecting to default for the first time on its annual payment for future retiree health benefits. This is according to the Times last week. The $5.5 billion payment is due August 1st. The Postal Service is also scheduled to make a $5.6 billion payment in September. The $5.5 billion payment was deferred from fiscal year 2011. The August payment is for fiscal year 2012. Spokesman for the agency said, barring intervention from Congress, it would default on both payments. Understand what happens here. In 2006, the Congress voted to force the post office to fund the future benefits of retirees on a 75-year out window. So in other words, people who are not even born yet. The post office is supposed to fully fund over the next 10 or 15 years benefits for them to pay out 75 years from now. There is no other government agency, there is no other private enterprise in the country, probably the world, that does this. However, a Republican-led Congress forced the post office to make these payments. Earlier this year, in April, the Senate approved a bill that would allow the agency to make payments into its health care fund for future retirees over the next 40 years, which would have lowered the annual payment to about $2.5 billion. The post office now is in $25 billion arrears, I believe, for these payments, which of course is the 5 or 6 years since then. It is true that the post office is losing money and need to raise the rate of stamps. But 85% of the post office's deficit is a function of these payments. The Republicans in the House refuse to allow the post office to spread out these payments. So, what is the solution here? When you have a Republican-controlled House that is trying to kill the U.S. Post Office, what is the solution? Says President Obama's former budget manager. Well, he says, those who believe in the usefulness of government must be vigilant about making sure all of its activities are vital ones, since the unnecessary ones undermine public confidence. With this in mind, Congress should now privatize the U.S. Postal Service. Apparently at Citibank, they don't send out their bills via the mail. He writes, when the Postal Service announced that it would be unable to meet billions of dollars in payments that are coming due in August and September for future health benefits, it provided further evidence. I don't know what further evidence means. He says the Postal Service faces 3 problems. First, Congress has not given it the permission it needs to cut costs and raise revenue. In other words, it will not allow them to make adjustments to the Postal Service and basically to raise the price of stamps. And lawmakers seem unable to approve even modest reforms. Second, its market has been declining for years as email, electronic payment, and other alternatives to traditional mail have grown. Third, the economic slump has caused a further drop-off in mail volumes. Understand something right now. The post office charges the taxpayer, in other words, receives funding from the taxpayer they get exactly $0 every year from the taxpayer. $0. They have always received $0 from taxpayers. They have been an operation that funds itself completely through the sales of stamps, postal services. The post office has also improved significantly in terms of efficiency. Even Mr. Orszag admits the Cato Institute noted a decade ago sorting 35,000 letters an hour required 70 employees. Today, it takes only 2. Over the past 6 years, the number of career postal service workers has declined by more than 20%. This is not an inefficient agency. The post office, he writes, lost $25 billion from fiscal year 2007 to fiscal year 2011. Do the math. They're supposed to pay in $5 billion plus a year to fund a pension fund for people who have not even been born. And that was instituted in 2006. So where do you think that $25 billion comes from? Peter Orszag, the former budget manager, either can't do the math or just didn't think it was important to include in this piece. Now, here's the point. Of the roughly 32,000 local post offices across the country, fewer than 7,000 generate enough revenue to cover their costs. That's an important thing to remember here, folks. In the case of the Postal Service, he writes, privatization has become the best path forward. Why? It's simply because Congress won't act. And he says the best way to get around Congress now is to privatize the post office. Congress, which simply can't bring itself to allow the service to make its own decisions, and Congress won't do so as long as the post office remains part of the government. The post office has many assets which could be managed more efficiently if Congress got out of the way. In addition to its 32,000 post offices, it has 461 processing facilities, monopoly access to residential mailboxes, and an overfunded pension plan. Huh? These assets would attract bidders. Consider, for example, that many processing facilities and post offices sit on valuable real estate, and it may be smarter to sell many of them than to keep them. He goes, the counter-arguments caution against privatization, but none of them is convincing to Peter Orszag. The first, that Congress could simply unshackle the agency. But he doesn't see it being possible with this polarized Congress. So fixing the post office is not an available option because of politics. Therefore, we should sell off the post office. The second argument against privatization is only public sector post office can provide universal service. Well, it would appear so if only 7,000 of those 32,000 are profitable post offices. Does anyone in their right mind think that a private enterprise would maintain that? That's just all profit for them there. And he says, privatization, yet in sectors from telecommunications to electricity, universal service does not require government ownership. Let me think about what's different between electricity and telecommunications versus the post office. Well, the first thing would be that those wires are already in the ground. The most expensive part of providing universal electricity or telecommunications has already taken place. That is building the infrastructure. There is no postal infrastructure from the post office to the house. It doesn't exist. Well, I guess it's a road or perhaps a pony. So private enterprise has every incentive in the world to stop providing that. This is so disingenuous. It is impossible to believe that this man does not know, is not aware of this difference. He writes, privatization could come with the obligation to provide universal service. FedEx and UPS already deliver to almost all U.S. addresses. Yes, they do. If you're sending something at a minimum of $12. So those 12 letters that you get in the mailbox, that 42 cents or 44 cents a letter will now cost you $48 to receive, or I guess to send. For the hard-to-reach, unprofitable routes, a subsidy could be provided. So now we have Peter Orszag saying Congress could actually pay out money to these private companies to do the service which involves no taxpayer money right now to the post office. This is so unbelievable. And of course, this presupposes that Congress is going to agree to pay subsidies to these private companies. So now, Orszag is saying, let's have public subsidies for private mail carriers. This is just the most incredible steaming pile of horse crap. And I will also say it is probably the best articulated argument for privatizing the post office. They can be the same thing simultaneously, which is there is no valid argument to privatize the postal service. Labor compensation accounts for 80% of postal service costs, a much higher share than at FedEx or UPS. So Orszag takes it a step further. Not only should we subsidize private companies for delivering universal delivery, which of course is really the only relevant thing about the post office, right? We should privatize it, subsidize it, and hopefully they'll cut the amount of people they hire and employ and cut their wages. So you'll have U.S. taxpayers subsidizing shareholders, CEOs, board of directors to a tune that is undoubtedly impossible to imagine wouldn't be at higher rates of compensation than we now have in the postal service. Cutting the wages of those middle-class workers who deliver the mail and sort the mail. And all because Congress won't act to save the post office. What a bold proposal. This is honestly one of the most douchebaggish pieces I've ever read, not written by Tom Friedman.